Ever have a headline just, make you stop and read it again?
Oh, yeah.
That definitely happened for me this week with the news from the Maldives. A travel ban kind of seemed to pop up almost out of the blue. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's try and unpack this. It's a pretty specific ban, isn't it?
It really is. And what's striking is exactly who it targets. People holding Israeli passports.
Right.
It's not some general border tightening. It's a very direct policy aimed at one nationality.
Exactly. So for this deep dive, we've got some material here, articles from Middle East Eye, AP News, that really help clarify the why, the when, and maybe the bigger picture,
Yeah, they're helpful for piecing it together.
And for you listening, our goal today is basically to get beyond just the headline, to really understand what's driving this. Think of it as your fast track to getting a handle on a pretty complex geopolitical moment.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So where should we start? Maybe pin down exactly when this ban actually happened.
Good idea. Okay, so Middle East Eye says the president, Muizzu, signed the legislation on Monday. And AP News sort of confirms that timeframe amendment passed Monday, got presidential approval on Tuesday. So really just at the start of this week.
So it's very recent. And who specifically does this affect again?
Well, both sources are clear. It's individuals holding Israeli passports. Full stop.
Okay.
But there was that interesting point about dual citizenship, wasn't there?
Yes. AP News did mention that. It seems Israeli citizens who also have a second passport from another country might still be able to enter.
Interesting.
Which suggests the ban is really zeroed in on the Israeli passport itself as the document.
Got it. Okay, so let's get into the why, the motivation. It seems pretty strongly linked to the ongoing conflict in Gaza, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. There's no ambiguity there.
Yeah.
Both Middle East Eye and AP News point directly to it being a protest against Israel's military actions in Gaza.
Right.
Middle East Eye even quotes the Maldivian government talking about their resolute solidarity with the Palestinian people.
And the language from the president's office, reported by AP, wow, it's quite forceful.
Yeah. What did it say?
Things like continuing atrocities and ongoing acts of genocide committed by Israel against the Palestinian people, that really highlights how strongly they feel.
It certainly does. I mean, they're not framing this as some neutral administrative change. It's presented as a direct response to what they see as, well, severe human rights issues.
Definitely a moral stance being taken. Now, what about the timeline? Because this wasn't like a snap decision made overnight, right? Sounds like it's been brewing.
That's right. It's actually quite a drawn-out story. Middle East Eye points out that the president's cabinet, Muizzu's cabinet, had sort of resolved to do this way back in June 2024.
June? Wow.
Yeah, but it was contingent on Israel stopping military operations in Palestine. But the actual legal change got delayed.
And the path through their parliament wasn't simple either. Middle East Eye mentioned a bill from an opposition lawmaker back in May 2024.
Correct. That was aimed at amending the Immigration Act. Then the cabinet decided to broaden it to ban all Israeli passport holders. Initially, that included dual citizens, too. But then later, as we mentioned, that clarification came about maybe allowing entry for those with a second passport.
So some back and forth there.
Seems like it. And what's really interesting for Middle East Eye is how long this whole legislative process took.
Over 300 days.
300 days?
Yeah, with several amendments, apparently.
That tells you something. That while maybe the political will was there earlier, actually getting it into law was a whole other process.
Exactly. AP News also kind of echoes this, saying the cabinet decision was made almost a year ago, but didn't get formally locked in until just now.
So nearly a year from decision to action? Could be internal debates, political maneuvering, who knows?
Yeah, likely navigating some complex internal politics.
Okay, let's just zoom out for a second. The Maldives itself, for anyone listening who might just picture the beautiful beaches, what's the basic context here?
Sure. AP News gives a good summary. It's that small island nation, an archipelago south of India, famous obviously as a high-end tourist spot.
Right, the luxury resorts. Exactly. But importantly, it's also a predominantly Sunni Muslim nation. And the law there actually bans preaching or practicing other religions publicly.
That religious and cultural context feels pretty relevant here, doesn't it? Probably a big factor in this decision.
It seems highly likely, yes. That sense of shared identity, solidarity with Palestinians, often rooted in religious connection, is probably a key driver behind this.
Makes sense. Now let's talk numbers and impact. AP News mentioned, 59 people with Israeli passports entered in February?
Yeah, 59.
honestly, that doesn't sound like a huge number in the grand scheme of tourism.
No, in terms of sheer volume for Maldivian tourism, it's small. Relatively tiny, even.
What?
But remember what one of the sources you shared highlighted? Tourism is massive for their economy, over 20% of the GDP.
Right. Okay. Big number.
So while banning, 59 people directly might seem minor economically, the symbolism of the move and maybe the ripple effects, that's different. Could it influence how other groups see the Maldives as a destination? Maybe.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating tension, isn't it? You've got this very strong moral, political statement, potentially rubbing up against the economic reality for a country so dependent on tourism.
Exactly. It really throws that question into sharp relief. What's the priority? The strength of their convictions on this issue versus potential economic fallout in a key sector.
So how are people reacting? What have been the immediate responses to the ban?
Well, the source you shared laid out a few things. The Maldivian government itself launched a national campaign, Maldivians in Solidarity with Palestine, encouraging donations, humanitarian aid. They're also appointing a special envoy to look into Palestinian needs.
So it's not just the ban, it's a wider package of demonstrating support.
Seems that way, yeah.
On the flip side, Israel's reaction was pretty direct. They've advised their citizens, even those with a second passport, not to travel to the Maldives.
Right. A clear travel advisory.
And they're apparently urging any Israeli tourists who are already in the Maldives to leave. Okay, so that signals pretty clearly how Israel is viewing this. A definite negative turn in relations, even if the direct tourism numbers weren't huge.
Definitely. And the source also contextualizes this, pointing out the Maldives now joins, over a dozen other countries that don't recognize Israeli passports for entry?
So they're not alone in this stance.
No. It puts them alongside countries like Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Malaysia, Iran, Bangladesh, several others mentioned in your source. It's a position shared by a number of Muslim-majority nations.
Which brings us to the sort of broader significance then. This is clearly more than just an update to immigration rules.
Absolutely. Your source rightly called it a bold geopolitical move. It's a powerful symbol.
A symbol of what, mainly?
Well, solidarity of the Palestinians, obviously. But it also reflects, perhaps, a growing global unease or backlash against the ongoing violence in the Middle East.
Yeah, it definitely feeds into those bigger conversations happening worldwide about travel, diplomacy, the calls for justice for Palestinians. And for a relatively small nation to take this step, it feels like it carries maybe disproportionate symbolic weight on the world stage.
I think that's fair to say. What's especially notable, again, is that a country so reliant economically on global tourism is willing to make such a politically charged move, potentially impacting its own bottom line, to make this statement.
Okay, so let's wrap this up for you, the listener. We've dug into the Maldives banning Israeli passport holders, basically a protest move linked to the Gaza conflict.
Right.
We looked at the timing, how it was just enacted this week, but the decision itself goes back nearly a year. A long process.
Very long process.
And we've placed it in that wider context, seeing how it aligns the Maldives with other Muslim-majority countries on this issue and what it signals globally. Hopefully, this deep dive has given you a much clearer picture of everything involved.
And it leaves us, and you, with a really interesting question to chew on, doesn't it? Thinking about that economic reliance. How might this decision actually play out for the Maldives long term? In terms of its international relationships, its tourism sector specifically.
That's a great point. Could it influence other nations? What does it mean for the future of using travel policy as a diplomatic signal?
Exactly. Lots to think about there.
Definitely. So plenty for you to keep exploring, keep digging into these global events, form your own informed views. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.